You are a young woman, trembling, pressed against the cold ground in a tent heavy with the stench of sweat, leather, and horsehide. Outside, smoke from a burning Tangut village chokes the night air. Your wrists ache from the coarse ropes biting into your skin. Your heart races so loudly you are certain the men outside can hear it. Hooves thunder past, the earth quaking beneath them. Shouts of Mongol warriors pierce the darkness. Harsh, guttural, triumphant. You cannot know if it was your village they destroyed or another, but the screams you heard still echo, sharp as the crack of a whip. The flap of the tent shifts. A shadow fills the entrance, broad, immovable. You shrink back as the canvas parts and he steps inside. He is no drunken soldier. His eyes, cold as flint, sweep across the dim interior. You know instantly who he is, though you have never seen him. Everyone knows the name. Genghis Khan. The conqueror whispered with fear from the steppes to distant cities. He says nothing, but his presence is thunder. You understand in that moment. You are not here by chance. You are spoil, a prize of war, and that truth weighs heavier than the ropes. The night outside is endless. Fires roar, steel clashes. The cries of the defeated rise like smoke into the sky. Inside the tent, you are not alone. Other women crouch nearby, faces streaked with dirt and fear, their eyes darting like cornered animals. Some you recognize. Others are strangers torn from distant lands. To the Mongols, it makes no difference. You are bodies, currency to reward warriors, tools to bind the empire tighter. Genghis Khan stands unmoving, his fur-lined cloak catching the glow of a flickering lamp. His weathered face shows no mercy. In his eyes burns calculation, hunger, ambition beyond war. He does not touch you. Not yet. He gestures to a guard, a scarred giant of a man. Words you cannot understand fall from his lips. The guard obeys, seizing one of the women and dragging her into the night. Her muffled cry is swallowed by the chaos outside. You want to resist, to scream, but fear crushes you into silence. And in that silence you feel the truth. This is not only the story of conquest, of cavalry and cities reduced to ash. This is the story of the women whose suffering was hidden. The Mongol Empire, forged by Genghis Khan from 1206 until his death in 1227, stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea. It was built on the strength of warriors and the suffering of those they conquered. Yet behind the legends of charging horsemen and burning towns lies a darker reality, one the chronicles rarely tell, the systematic use of women as instruments of war, of power, of desire. The secret history of the Mongols, a 13th century record, is silent on this subject. But Persian and Chinese writers, who saw the Mongol tide with their own eyes, left hints of the truth. Women like Hu, taken from villages in Shishia, Khorazm, or the Jin realm, were not only victims of raids. They became part of Genghis Khan's vision. To understand this, we must turn back to the man himself and the harsh world that shaped him. Temujin, later Genghis Khan, was born in 1162 into the Borjigin clan. His father, Yasugei, was a minor chief. His mother, Holun, had been stolen from her people, taken by force, made a wife. Violence marked the beginning of his life. When Temujin was 9, Yasugei was poisoned by rivals. The clan abandoned the widow and her children to the merciless steppe. Holun taught her children to live on roots, fish, and wild game, to endure hunger and cold, and to fear no one. Enemies circled them like wolves, but she taught survival. Temujin learned quickly that strength was life. In a quarrel over food, he killed his half-brother Bektar. Blood taught him a cruel lesson. Weakness had no place in the steppe. Years later, his wife Borte was stolen by the Merkit. Temujin, with allies Jamukha and Togrul, fought to bring her back. She returned carrying a child. In 1182 she gave birth to Joki. Temujin accepted him as his son, though whispers of another father never ceased. That wound scarred him deeply. It was not only a personal tragedy, but a revelation. Loyalty was fragile, betrayal always near, and only control could guarantee survival. This event shaped the man who would rise as Genghis Khan. In a land where power was fragile, where clans shifted like sand and women were traded like livestock, Temujin learned a single truth: to command was to endure. By 1206, after years of ruthless war, Temujin had united the tribes of the steppe. At the Great Council he was given a new name, Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. His empire was more than an army. It was a structure of power, a system of control. And women stood at its core. For the Mongols, pragmatic and nomadic, marriage and concubinage were not simply matters of desire. They were political weapons used to bind clans, secure loyalty, and knit conquered peoples into the empire. Genghis kept 4 principal wives: Borte, Kulan, Yesue, and Yasujin. Each oversaw an ordo, a camp that was both household and political court. Around them stretched an immense harem. Historians estimate as many as 500 women lived there, though only a fraction were officially named. Many were daughters of defeated rulers, tribute offered in the hope of sparing their people. Some were nobles torn from palaces, others slaves sold in the markets of Bokhara and Samarkand. Each night, Genghis moved between tents, guarded by the Kashig, 10,000 elite warriors who tracked his every step. The harem was not indulgence alone. It was politics, a way to weave bloodlines into the empire, to turn intimacy into strategy. Imagine yourself among them. You are taken from your home during the fall of Wulai. Its walls, once thought unbreakable, crumbled under Mongol siege engines. Now you sit inside a smoky yurt that reeks of damp wool and burning herbs. Your silk gown hangs torn at the edges. Cold seeps through the thin cloth, biting to the bone. Outside, the camp stirs with sound. Horses snorting, men laughing, the ring of whetstone against steel. Inside, whispers coil in many tongues. Some women speak of escape, but the steppe is endless, and the Mongols show no mercy. Others whisper of survival, of bending, of learning obedience, of finding a fragile place in this brutal order. In the firelight their faces are etched. A girl no more than 16, her eyes hollow. An older woman, hands clasped in prayer, her language unknown. Different in age and origin, yet all bound to the same fate. The system was harsh but deliberate. Women were ranked: principal wives, concubines, slaves. Wives like Borte held high standing, managing households, even advising in war. Concubines, often noble captives, lived in relative comfort, though never free. Slaves bore the heaviest burden. Endless labor, humiliation, or sail along the Silk Road. The Persian historian Giovanni described women traded like cattle, their worth measured in horses or gold. Some were handed to soldiers for relief after battle. Others, judged rare or beautiful, were taken into the Khan's own tents, where they lived in gilded cages, their every movement dictated by his will. To lose favor meant demotion, exile, or death. Power was absolute. Yet even within this iron structure, women sometimes found subtle ways to shape events. Borte, the first wife, became a trusted advisor, her words respected even by generals. Mongol women of the tribes often shared in public life, driving wagons, tending herds, even riding into battle. But those freedoms belonged only to the freeborn. Captives knew none of it. For them there was no choice. And now you feel it, the weight of eyes upon you, the silent demand to obey, to endure. The guard returns, boots crunching on packed earth. He points at you, your stomach knots. You force yourself to rise, legs trembling. The other women turn their faces away, their silence heavier than any scream. Genghis's use of women was never only about desire. It was policy. By taking wives and concubines from every conquered tribe, he bound peoples to his rule and scattered his bloodline across the steppe. Modern science has confirmed what Chronicles only hinted at. A 2003 study in the American Journal of Human Genetics revealed that 8% of men across former Mongol lands, around 16 million alive today, carry a Y chromosome traceable to Genghis Khan. This was no accident. He fathered hundreds, perhaps thousands of children. Official records list only 9 by Borte: 4 sons, Joki, Shagatai, Ogdi, and Talyui, and 5 daughters. The rest, born of concubines and slaves, were left unnamed. Their mothers, forgotten by history. As you are led from the tent, a thought strikes like cold iron. If you bear a child, will it vanish into that vast, faceless bloodline too? The camp sprawls before you, a sea of yurts beneath a sky bright with stars. The air bites with the smell of roasting mutton and the faint tang of blood. Warriors move between fires, laughing harshly, their faces flushed with kumis, the fermented mare's milk that flows after every victory. You are brought to a larger yurt. Soldiers stand at its doorway, spears flashing in the firelight. Inside it is warmer, heavy with fur and incense. Genghis sits on a low stool, hands resting on his knees. His eyes stay fixed on a map, its curling edges like dry leaves. Lines are carved deep into his face. Gray threads his braid. He is a man who has lived in the saddle for decades, fighting, conquering, surviving. When he finally speaks, his voice is quiet, almost gentle. But beneath it lies iron, like stone hidden under soft soil. You cannot understand the words, but the meaning is clear. This is not a request. And Genghis was not alone in such customs. His heirs carried them forward. Ogdi, who ruled from 1229 to 1241, continued the practice. Rashid al-Din, writing in the early 14th century, recorded how in 1237 Ogdi punished the people of Iraq. 4,000 girls were violated before their families, then handed out as slaves. It was cruelty but also a warning, a proclamation of Mongol dominance. Yet Mongol society was not without contradictions. Adultery, for instance, was punished by death in Genghis's early conquests to prevent blood feuds. Later, fines replaced execution. Widows and unmarried women lived with freedoms unknown in much of the world. In Song China, women's feet were bound to cripple them, a symbol of weakness. Mongol women, by contrast, rode, traded, and worked at the heart of nomadic life. But those freedoms never reached captives. For you, such strength lies out of reach. Days blur into weeks. You learn the rhythm of the camp. The stir before dawn as warriors ready their raids. The groan of wagons when the ordo shifts across the steppe. The hushed hours when women trade stories under the cloak of night. You study the Khan's moods, his eyes softening when he speaks of Borte, hardening like steel when rebellion is mentioned. You learn to endure. You bury sorrow for the life you lost. Around you, some women adapt quickly, their voices growing sharper, their gaze harder. One, a Khwarezmian woman named Aishia, whispers a rumor one night that Genghis once shared a blanket with his sworn brother Jamukha in youth, a brotherhood that ended in betrayal and blood. The tale feels like a warning. Loyalty is fragile, even the mighty may fall. By 1215, Genghis's armies plundered Zhongdu, the Jin capital, before turning west toward Khwarezm. In 1219, Otrar became a blood-soaked ruin. When the governor Inalchuk enraged Genghis by killing his envoys, the Mongols answered with annihilation. The city was destroyed, its citizens cut open in search of hidden treasure. Women were seized in their thousands, some for the Khan's harem, others for the slave markets that thrived on despair. Chroniclers would later write that the trade in women became one of the empire's pillars, built on suffering. You see it again now, in the faces of new captives brought into camp. Their eyes mirror the same terror you once felt. The cycle continues endlessly, as relentless as the steppe wind. And yet, within that cycle, rare sparks of humanity flicker. One evening near the Helan Mountains, a Mongol woman, not a captive, but born of the tribe, offers you a bowl of warm mare's milk. Her hands are rough, her face lined with age, but the gesture is gentle. Her presence feels like a fragile bridge to a softer world untouched by conquest. Her name is Kalan, one of the lesser wives. Patiently, she teaches you simple Mongol words. Such moments are rare, yet they keep you from breaking completely. Years pass, and Genghis grows older even as his wars grow harsher. By 1227, he lays siege to the Tangut once more, determined to crush their rebellion. Whispers spread. The Khan is weakened by a fall from his horse. On August 18, 1227, he dies in his camp near Yinchuan. His body is carried back to Mongolia in secret. Chroniclers, Marco Polo among them, later claimed his funeral was sealed with blood. Thousands of slaves slaughtered to hide his grave. You do not see it yourself, for you remain in the Ordo, now under the gaze of one of his sons. The harem does not vanish. It changes shape. Some women are abandoned, others traded like goods across the empire. You wonder if your homeland still exists, or if the steppe has already swallowed it. But the story does not end here. For the silence that surrounds the Khan's passing is only the beginning of a new struggle, one in which his heirs, his generals, and his women all play their part. You are barely 20, lying on the cold earth inside a yurt that reeks of sweat and horsehide. Smoke seeps through the canvas from burning villages, perhaps your own, and the night itself seems to tremble. Your wrists are raw from the ropes, your pulse hammering so loud it drowns the cries outside. Hooves pound. Laughter cuts the darkness, harsh and merciless. You try to vanish into the shadows, but there is no escape. The flap tears open. A figure steps inside, broad and unyielding against the firelight. His eyes, cold as the winter steppe, fix on you. You know the face, though you have never seen him. Everyone does. Genghis Khan. Born Temujin in 1162. His name carried in dread across deserts and distant cities alike. His presence is overwhelming, as if a storm has taken human form. And in that moment you understand, you are no accident of war. You are a trophy claimed by power. Outside, the camp heaves like a living beast. Fires crackling, iron clashing, voices of the conquered fading into night. Inside, other women crouch in silence, their faces streaked with ash, their eyes darting like cornered deer. Some you recognize, others are strangers from lands you've never seen. To the Mongols, it makes no difference. Farmer's daughter, noble's sister, merchant's wife, all are the same. Property. Genghis stands still, his fur-lined cloak catching the flicker of lamplight. Scars and deep lines carve his face. His braid is streaked with gray, but his eyes burn sharp and calculating. There is hunger in them, not only for flesh, but for power, for the threads that weave empires together. He murmurs to a guard, a giant with a scar across his cheek. The man drags a woman from the shadows, her cry cut short by the chaos outside. You want to scream, to claw the earth, but your body betrays you, frozen under the weight of fate. Chronicles call this conquest. They praise the thunder of cavalry, the fall of Zhongdu in 1215, the storming of Samarkand in 1220. They call it empire, stretching from the Sea of Japan to the Caspian. But beneath the stories of steel and fire lies another truth, one few dared to write. The secret history of the Mongols, composed in the 13th century, celebrates victories but hides the cost. Persian chroniclers like Juvayni and Rashid al-Din, and Chinese scribes of the Jin and Song, hint at it in fragments. Women torn from their homes in Shishya, Khorazm, or the Kipchak plains. Not merely victims, but tools of power, bound into the machine that was the Khan's empire, used to reward warriors and secure bloodlines. To understand how such a world was forged, we must look back to the man himself, Temujin, who would become Genghis Khan. He was born in 1162, on the banks of the Onon River, son of Yasuji, a minor leader of the Borjigin clan, and Holun, a woman taken by force from the Merkit. His life began in hardship. When Temujin was 9, his father was poisoned by Tatar rivals, and the clan abandoned his family to the merciless steppe. Holun kept her children alive on roots and small game, teaching them endurance and caution, how to survive hunger, how to vanish from enemies who hunted them like prey. The steppe itself was their teacher, a place where loyalty was fleeting, and only strength or cunning meant survival. In 1181, Temujin's young wife Borte was carried off by the Merkit. For him, it was a wound deeper than steel. He rescued her with the help of allies like Jamukha and Togrul. Yet when she returned, she was with child. The boy, Joki, born in 1182, was accepted as Temujin's son. But whispers of doubt would never fade. That betrayal, more painful than any sword, carved his view of the world. Trust was rare. Control was survival. By 1206, after years of blood and betrayal, killing his half-brother Bektar, defeating Jamukha, crushing the Nayman, Temujin had united the Mongol tribes. He claimed the title Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. His empire was not just an army. It was a machine of power, and women were the hidden gears that made it turn. The Mongols were pragmatic. Marriage and concubinage were not only about desire but about politics. Through wives and captives, they bound tribes, secured loyalty, and spread their dominion. Genghis had 4 chief wives, Borte, Kulan, Yesue, and Yasujin, each commanding her own ordo, a moving household that was at once a home and a political court. Historian Barzanjev Turbish, in his 2023 study Sex in the Land of Genghis Khan, estimates that the Khan's harem may have held as many as 500 women, though only 44 are named in records. Many were noble captives, like Shaka, daughter of the Tangut king, or the Jin emperor's sister, surrendered to spare their people from destruction. Each night, the Khan moved between tents, watched by the Kashig, his elite guard of 10,000. This harem was no indulgence. It was a political weapon, weaving bloodlines and binding conquered peoples into the empire. Now picture yourself, a captive from Wulahai, taken in 1207 when Mongol siege engines shattered your city walls. Your silk gown, once a father's gift, is frayed at the hem. Cold creeps into your bones. The yurt reeks of damp wool and burning herbs, a sweetness masking the bite of fear. Outside, horses snort, their breath steaming in the frost. Warriors grind their blades, the rasp of stone against iron never ceasing. Inside, women whisper in urgent tones. A girl of 16 hugs her knees, eyes hollow. An older woman folds calloused hands in prayer in a tongue you cannot understand. Some dream of flight, but the steppe is a prison without walls. Scouts ride faster than hope. Others speak of survival, bending, yielding, learning to endure. You see it in their faces, the fading of who they once were, replaced by something harder, sharper. The Mongol order was precise. Women were divided like herds. Principal wives, concubines, and slaves. Borte, the first wife, carried authority, managing trade and offering counsel even in war. Concubines, usually daughters of defeated rulers, lived in golden cages, their status tied to the Khan's favor. Slaves faced the harshest fate, cooking, cleaning, or serving the soldiers' demands. The Persian historian Javani described women exchanged like cattle, their value measured in horses or gold. A 2025 article on Vocal Media echoes the same. Soldiers took captives for comfort, their bodies handed out as rewards of war. The most beautiful were sent to the Khan's harem. There, life was softer but never free. To lose favor meant exile, slavery, or death in silence. Power was always a narrow rope. Genghis ruled with absolute authority, yet women like Borte shaped events in ways few chronicles describe. She counseled him on war and governance, and even generals listened when she spoke. Historian Turbish reminds us that Mongol women were the backbone of nomadic life, driving carts, tending herds, sometimes even riding into battle. But captives knew none of that freedom. You feel it now, the weight of stairs, the unspoken demand to endure, to survive. The scarred guard returns, his boots crunching on the packed earth, and he points at you. Your stomach knots, but you force yourself to rise, your legs trembling. The other women turn away, their silence heavier than screams. For Genghis, the taking of women was never just lust, it was strategy. By binding himself to daughters of Tangut, Khwarezmian, and Kipchak rulers, he extended his lineage across the steppe, weaving blood into empire. Modern science confirms what the Chronicles only hinted at. A 2003 study in the American Journal of Human Genetics found that 8% of men in former Mongol lands, about 16 million alive today, carry a Y chromosome traceable to Genghis and his sons. He fathered hundreds, perhaps thousands of children. Yet only 9 by Borte are named in the records. 4 sons, Joki, Shagatai, Ogdi, and Talyui, and 5 daughters. The countless others, born of concubines and slaves, slipped into the shadows of history, their mothers erased from memory. As the guard escorts you through the camp, you wonder if any child of yours would be one of those shadows, forgotten, yet carrying the Khan's blood. The camp spreads beneath a sky blazing with stars. The air is sharp, filled with the smell of roasted mutton and the metallic bite of blood. Warriors stride past the fires, laughing roughly, faces flushed with kumis. You are taken to a larger yurt, guarded at its entrance by soldiers whose spears gleam like fangs in the firelight. Inside, the air is thick with incense and fur. Genghis sits on a low stool, hands resting on his knees, a map spread before him, its edges curling like dried leaves. Lines cut deep into his face. Streaks of gray thread his braid. He is a man weathered by decades in the saddle, conquering, fighting, surviving. When he speaks, his voice is quiet, almost gentle, yet beneath it lies steel. You cannot grasp the words, but the meaning is clear. This is not a request. Here there is no choice, only survival. And this pattern did not end with him. His sons and heirs carried it forward. Ogidi, who ruled from 1229 to 1241, became infamous for his cruelty. Rashid al-Din records that in 1237, as punishment of the Urarat people, 4,000 young girls were violated before their families, then sold into slavery. Brutality was not only vengeance, it was a message, a warning of Mongol power. Yet Mongol society was never simple. As Turbish observes, adultery in Genghis's early conquests was punished by death to prevent blood feuds. But later laws softened, replacing execution with fines. Unmarried women and widows enjoyed freedoms unknown in Song China, where foot-binding crippled girls into weakness. But for captives like you, such freedoms were illusions. Days blur into weeks. You learn the rhythm of the camp, the stir of warriors before dawn, the groan of wooden carts when the ordo moves, the whispers traded after nightfall. You begin to read the Khan's moods, the rare softness in his eyes when he speaks of Borte, the hard steel when rebellion is mentioned. You bury your grief, your homeland fading into memory. Some women adapt quickly. One, a Khwarezmian named Aisha, whispers to you at night. She tells of Genghis and Jamukha, once sworn brothers who shared a blanket in their youth, only for Temujin to order Jamukha's death in 1205. The tale chills you. It feels less like a story and more like a warning. Loyalty is fragile, and even the mightiest bonds can shatter in blood. On August 18, 1227, Genghis Khan died near Yinchuan. His body was carried away in secrecy, his grave hidden forever. Marco Polo would later claim that 2,000 slaves were slaughtered so that none could reveal the resting place of the great Khan. But his death was not an ending. It was the beginning of a shadow that stretches across centuries. His ordo did not vanish. The women remained, some abandoned, others traded, their lives reshaped by the will of his sons. The empire he carved from blood and fire endured, expanding even further under his heirs. The Chronicles praise his victories, yet they fall silent on the price. The women taken, the children unnamed, the voices erased. They remain only as echoes. And yet, his mark cannot be erased. Modern science tells us what history tried to hide. Millions alive today still carry his blood, a genetic empire as vast as the land he once ruled. His name survives in stone, in legend, and in silence. You, the captive woman in the tent, are part of that legacy. Your suffering, though forgotten by scribes, was woven into the fabric of his empire. The stars above remain indifferent, the steppe endless, but his presence lingers still, in memory, in blood, in silence. Genghis Khan is dead, yet his shadow still weighs upon the world.